Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into just one day, August 18th, 2025, a day absolutely packed with developments, moving incredibly fast all over the globe. You've given us your sources, articles, notes, all sorts of research, and our job is to pull out the really crucial bits, the insights you need, without you getting buried in information. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, what's really fascinating, I think, is just how connected all these headlines are. They sort of paint a vivid picture, don't
Yep.
they, of the challenges, but also the advancements of, well, of our time.
Mhm.
August 18th really works as this kind of microcosm. You see high-stakes diplomacy, climate extremes, tech leaps. It's all there.
It really is, and the diplomacy was certainly high stakes. Let's start with Ukraine. August 18th, you had President Trump meeting President Zelensky and European leaders too, like Macron in Washington. Now, Trump had been saying for a while he could get Putin and Zelensky talking directly, but the actual details, how any preconditions,
Yeah.
still seemed pretty vague.
Yeah.
And all this was happening with Europe feeling, well, pretty anxious about where U.S. policy might go and the need for some solid security guarantees for Ukraine. What was so critical about this meeting?
Well, it really gets to that deep unease you mentioned. The report suggested the terms being floated were quite stark. Things like Ukraine giving up claims to Crimea, shelving the whole NATO ambition idea.
But Zelensky wasn't having.
No, absolutely not. He firmly rejected that. Kyiv's position was clear.
Yeah.
Any ceasefire has to actually stop the fighting, stop the aggression, not just, freeze the lines where they are. But the insight here, I think, is how the U.S. even suggesting security guarantees outside NATO. Well, critics jumped on that.
Right.
They saw it as maybe signaling that Western resolve was weakening. And you saw the Ukrainian diaspora protesting exactly that point. It's such a delicate balance, projecting strength while you're trying to find a way out.
From one tightrope to another. Let's turn to the Israel-Gaza conflict. Also, huge movement on August 18th. Hamas announced they'd accepted a ceasefire proposal from mediators. Reports said 60 days, some hostages released, Palestinian prisoners released in return.
Yeah, that was the news.
Israeli operations were still ongoing, and officials there were saying, our position hasn't changed, which left the whole deal kind of up in the air.
It did. And you absolutely have to look at the internal dynamics inside Israel at that moment. The pressure was just immense.
You're talking about the protests.
Exactly. Over 500,000 Israelis apparently flooded Tel Aviv, other cities, huge rallies demanding the hostages be released, demanding an end to the war. They even had a general strike, blocked traffic.
Wow.
But then you contrast that with Prime Minister Netanyahu rejecting what he called premature concessions.
So internal politics playing a huge role.
Definitely. It really shows how domestic political survival can, well, hamstring a leader trying to navigate these incredibly complex peace efforts to become this clash between, public anguish and political strategy.
And speaking of anguish, the humanitarian side in Gaza, just dire. Groups warning about ongoing famine conditions, the desperate need for sustained aid access. On the 18th, a ship left Cyprus, heading for Ashdod in Israel with 1,200 tons of food, trying to speed up aid delivery.
That's right.
Organizers said they hoped it would coincide with the ceasefire, but they were going ahead regardless because the need was just escalating so fast. Sounds positive, but what were the catches?
Well, it was a step showing this kind of evolving aid route through Israeli ports. But experts were very quick to say, look, sea shipments alone, they just can't meet the scale of need in Gaza.
Needs more land access.
Much more predictable, much more significant land access. And you had this huge international outcry building, too. Warnings about a, quote, deliberate campaign leading to widespread starvation. There are also these really concerning reports about the U.S. blocking medical evacuation visas for Palestinians. Amnesty International even accused Israel of, quote, weaponizing starvation.
That's a very serious charge.
Extremely serious. So the insight is, yes, individual shipments matter, but they don't fix the core problem of access. The situation on the ground remained catastrophic.
Okay, and briefly touching on another conflict zone, the Democratic Republic of Congo. Peace talks in Doha between the government and the M23 rebels. They missed their deadline on August 18th.
Yeah, they did. Disagreements over, who does what first, the preconditions.
Yeah.
They couldn't get an agreement.
Raising fears things could escalate again.
Exactly. And that failure connects directly to the wider instability. Just around then, there was this horrific attack by IS-linked rebels, killed over 50 civilians in the east. It just underscores the humanitarian cost when diplomacy fails, and it shakes investor confidence, too, especially with Congo's vital mineral resources.
Yeah.
The vacuum gets filled by violence.
Right. So while all that's happening globally, let's shift focus back home. to Washington, D.C., because things were pretty dramatic there, too. President Trump had deployed the National Guard on August 11th, taking control of the city's police. By the 18th, more Republican-led states were sending their Guard units in, too.
Augmenting the federal force.
Yeah, and the visuals were, well, striking. Armored vehicles, Guard patrols. Even though critics were pointing out that actually violent crime stats in D.C. had been trending down. What are the legal and civil liberties implications of that kind of domestic military presence?
Oh, they're significant, really significant. Using the Guard for domestic policing like that is incredibly rare and sensitive. It sparked immediate warnings about, normalizing the military's role in just routine public safety.
And it escalated on the 18th.
It did. This footage emerged, quite alarming footage, of heavily armed federal officers in unmarked vehicles detaining a food delivery worker.
Oh.
That specific incident really sparked outrage. Activists started calling it a de facto federal occupation.
A federal occupation?
Yeah. The core insight is how easily these deployments can reshape that civilian-military relationship and potentially erode trust, especially when you see individual liberties curtailed so visibly.
And there was another layer, too. Reuters reported White House social media teams were actually going out with FBI agents during some arrests in D.C.
Recording footage.
Yeah, recording footage for online anti-crime campaigns. One video, apparently widely viewed, showed the arrest of a former DOJ employee. That just sounds off. White House social media with the FBI.
It drew immediate sharp criticism from legal scholars. They questioned if it was even compatible with DOJ norms, let alone defendants' constitutional rights.
Prejudice in cases.
That was the argument, that it risks prejudice in cases, undermining the FBI's whole apolitical posture. The crucial question it raises is profound. It risks making law enforcement look politically motivated, not impartial. That erodes public trust.
And there are protests in D.C. that weekend, too.
Big ones. Thousands marching to the White House, protesting the loss of local control, the militarization.
And then separately, but also controversial, the immigration incident in New York City.
Yes, the detention of a 7-year-old girl, her brother and mother. The first ICE arrest of a minor in New York during Trump's second term, apparently.
Leading to family separation, more protests.
Exactly. And all these domestic events, they had political reverberations. That Reuters Ipsos poll out on the 18th showed Trump's approval at 40%.
Lowest of his term.
Lowest of that term. And historically, below 45% often signals trouble for the president's party in the midterms.
Though the White House was arguing their policies would show results before 2026.
Right. They were betting on a turnaround. But it shows how these domestic policy choices, especially around federal power and civil liberties, connect directly to political standing.
Okay, let's pivot. Let's talk about the global economy. Wall Street on August 18th, pretty flat.
Yeah, mostly flat, hovering near record highs. But investors were really looking ahead to the Fed's Jackson Hole Symposium later that week.
Waiting for hints on interest rates.
Exactly. Waiting for Fed Chair Jerome Powell's remarks. Anything that might, tee up a September policy move, as they say.
So calm on the surface, but churning underneath.
Definitely churning. Investors rotating around earnings reports. And oil prices firmed up that day, too, influenced by the Ukraine diplomacy we talked about and just general supply risks. Shows how sensitive markets are to geopolitics.
And some big tech investment news. SoftBank putting money into Intel.
A lot of money. $2 billion into Intel via an equity stake. And there was talk the U.S. government might take a stake, too.
What does that signal? Investing in a legacy chipmaker like Intel now.
It's a really notable sign, I think, of fortunes shifting for these older chip makers because of the huge AI build-out. And it points directly to Washington's industrial strategy.
Bringing manufacturing back home.
Right, focusing on resilient domestic manufacturing, cutting reliance on foreign supply chains. And here's where it gets really interesting for tech and geopolitics. This isn't just finance. It's strategic. It reflects this broader push to kind of reconfigure global tech supply chains. Semiconductor leadership is seen as absolutely critical national security now.
Interesting. Other business news, Soho House going private.
Yeah, the Members Club operator. Agreed to a $2.7 billion deal to go private after, what was described as a rocky run since they listed back in 2021.
Why do that? Go private again so soon.
Well, it lets them make longer-term capital plans without quarterly earnings pressure, escaping that short-term focus of the public markets. It seems for some businesses, especially in hospitality or service, the quarterly reporting cycle just doesn't fit well with the kind of long-term investment they need.
Right. And then media consolidation, meeting politics, Senator Schiff questioning the FCC.
Yeah, he was pressing the FCC about the Paramount Global Skydance merger review. Specifically, whether the White House had tried to get editorial or content concessions during that review.
Which raises.
First Amendment alarms, as
Right.
it was put. The concern is any hint of government trying to influence media content during regulatory reviews. It's a very sensitive area regarding press freedom.
And the U.S.-China trade conflict was biting hard that day, too. Applied Materials shares took a hit.
A big hit.
Yeah.
Down 14% on August 18th after they gave some pretty grim earnings guidance. It really highlighted how that escalating tariff situation was stoking fears.
Fears of job losses, rising prices.
Both. Fears of more U.S. manufacturing job losses, higher prices for consumers, and policymakers warning about technological decoupling, potentially rearranging global supply chains for years. Meanwhile, you saw India proposing tax cuts on small cars to boost their own economy, showing how countries were trying to navigate these headwinds. But the ripple effects of trade wars are profound.
Okay. From the economy to the environment, which was a huge part of the story on August 18th. Hurricane Erin.
Yeah, the first hurricane of the 2025 Atlantic season, and it intensified fast.
Category 5, briefly.
Briefly hit Cat 5 over those warm waters, then settled back to a Cat 4.
Mm.
But even offshore, its wind field was massive, pushed huge surf, dangerous rip currents all along the East Coast, forced evacuations in places like the Outer Banks.
What were meteorologists saying about it? Its intensity so early.
They pointed right at it, called its unprecedented early season intensity, an unequivocal example of how warming oceans are driving stronger, more frequent storms. It was like Exhibit A for how climate change is altering the physics of weather. Experts warning about existential risk for coastal cities, island nations.
It feels like these aren't just weather events anymore.
They're increasingly seen as direct results of a changing climate, a clear and growing threat.
And it wasn't just Erin. Wildfires in Spain?
Record wildfires, apparently, forced them to partially close the Camino de Santiago pilgrimage route. Huge heat wave there.
Big fires out west in the U.S., too?
Yeah, dangerous heat wave in Southern California, raising fire risk, plus large uncontained fires in the Rockies and High Plains. In Spain, the leadership was pushing for a cross-party climate pact, arguing, hotter, drier summers just make these megafires more likely.
And floods in Pakistan.
Catastrophic floods and landslides. Over 350 people killed, entire villages buried. Just horrific. Humanitarian groups pointed to it as more evidence that developing countries are bearing the absolute brunt of these climate extremes.
So the impacts are global, but unevenly felt.
Very unevenly. Wealthier nations grapple with the effects, but the most vulnerable often pay the immediate, devastating costs in lives and livelihoods.
And on the environmental front, also bad news for the UN plastic treaty talks.
Yeah, they collapsed. Major talks, UN-backed, aiming for a global treaty on plastic pollution. But negotiators just couldn't agree on binding reduction targets.
Not.
Well, environmental groups blamed oil-producing nations and chemical manufacturers for blocking progress. It really underscores how hard it is to get global consensus on these issues when powerful economic interests are at stake. Planet versus profit.
Okay, let's lighten the mood slightly. There were some breakthroughs on August 18th, too. Science wasn't standing still.
No, definitely not. Some really hopeful developments. A new mRNA cancer vaccine in preclinical trials showed near-complete elimination of tumors in mice. Huge buzz in the research community.
Wow. And Hubble.
Hubble captured its clearest image yet of an interstellar comet.
Yeah.
And China hosted the first ever Robot Olympics, apparently showcasing big leaps in humanoid robotics.
That's amazing progress. But you often talk about the dual nature of this stuff.
Right, because these breakthroughs offer incredible hope, new treatments, new possibilities, but they also immediately raise new questions. Safety, ethics, global competition. Human ingenuity is amazing, but every leap forward brings these complex challenges. We have to figure out how to manage these powerful new tools, who benefits, especially when everyone's competing.
Right. And one final piece from that day. A significant U.S. military presence noted in the Caribbean. President Trump authorized over 4,000 Marines, attack subs, naval assets, officially for anti-drug operations. But the scale, the secrecy, it raised eyebrows.
It did. It immediately sparked speculation about, broader geopolitical motives. Was it really just about drugs?
Or countering China and Russia.
That was the suggestion. Countering perceived Chinese and Russian influence in the hemisphere. And, predictably, it caused concern among neighboring countries about U.S. military interventionism again.
So even an anti-drug op gets viewed through a geopolitical lens.
Absolutely. Large military deployments, even with a stated mission, often carry these other signals. A show of force, strategic positioning, rarely just one thing.
Wow. Okay, so August 18th, 2025. What a day. High stakes diplomacy, domestic tension, climate crises, scientific leaps. It really covered the spectrum. And what we hope you get from this deep dive is just how valuable it is to connect those dots, to see how these seemingly separate events actually weave together.
Exactly, because when you start to see those connections, that's when you get a clearer picture.
It helps you become truly well informed.
Yeah. And despite how fast everything moves, what a day like August 18th really shows is a world wrestling with old conflicts and accelerating new challenges, all at the same time. But it also shows incredible bursts of human ingenuity, adaptation. Which leads to, I think, an important question for you, the listener. How do these snapshots, these intense moments like the ones we've unpacked today, how do they shape your long-term view, your view of progress, stability, our collective future?
Something to think about. How do these interconnected stories change your understanding of the world? We hope this deep dive leaves you with maybe some deeper insight and definitely some curiosity to keep digging.